Off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Ba, 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 ba. Okay. Students, hi. The Wizard of Oz. That's what our talk is about today. This isn't just a movie. It's part of American culture. Now, I'm going to talk to you today about some important things. So I want you to take some notes. There's going to be an activity for you to do after this video. Okay? In this talk, I'm going to give you basic information about the movie. I'm going to talk about the audiences who watched it when it first premiered in 1939 and also over the years since then. I'm going to talk to you about the characters and the story, and I'm going to tell you how important in American culture the Wizard of Oz really is to Americans. Okay, let's get started. Basic information. The Wizard of Oz is one of the most famous films in American movie history. When it was released in 1939, it got mostly great reviews. People loved the color, Technicolor. This was not the first Technicolor film. Technicolor had been around for 20 years, but still, Technicolor was expensive to use for movie theaters, or for movie studios rather, and the movie studio that made The Wizard of Oz was MGM, all right? I want you to remember that. Another reason why this movie was so popular was it was a musical. The characters were great, and it's a fun fairy tale. So there's a lot of interesting things going on in the movie The Wizard of Oz, all at the same time. Costumes, songs, characters, colors, and all that. It's, as I said, a kid's story. All right. The Wizard of Oz premiered at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood in August 1939. Now, you probably have heard of Grauman's Chinese Theater. It's on Hollywood Boulevard. It's the movie theater that has outside the movie theater in the cement. It has the handprints of many famous actors and actresses. The Wizard of Oz won 2 Oscars at the Academy Awards, one for Best Music and Best Original Song for Over the Rainbow. This movie was MGM's most expensive production ever. All right? Sets, costumes, color film, special effects, salaries for the actors, the directors. There's more than one director in this movie. And although the movie did well at the box office, it didn't make a profit for MGM when it was first released. So MGM re-released the movie at theaters all over America again in 1949. Now that's pretty smart marketing. You know, the movie becomes popular in 1939, and then the studio waits for another 10 years, and then they have another premiere of it. Now you're getting the same people who saw the movie in 1939. Now you're getting them to come back and watch it again and bring their young kids with them. Okay, so that kind of marketing really makes sense. The Wizard of Oz really started to make money as a film in the 1950s. Movies started to lose their popularity because most families in America were buying TVs. By 1955, most American homes had a TV set. In 1956, MGM was pretty smart. It sold the rights to show The Wizard of Oz on CBS TV for $250,000 per broadcast. That's right, $250,000. Hold on, let me do that. That's Nisen Gohyakuman in 1956 money. So that's really a lot of money for a network to pay. Then, from 1959 on, CBS showed The Wizard of Oz on TV every year. Now, Americans my age, most American adults alive today remember watching The Wizard of Oz for the first time on TV. It would come on once a year. I remember when I was a kid growing up in New Jersey, The Wizard of Oz would come on TV on Thanksgiving evening. Like, okay, Thanksgiving, let me explain. Thanksgiving is an American food feast, and it's held at the end of November every year. And so every year, MG or CBS would announce that, hey, we're showing The Wizard of Oz on Thanksgiving Day. And they'd show it like at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., something like that. So everyone has eaten food all day long, and now they're tired and they want to watch something, and the kids are all still full of energy. So we've got to do something to calm the kids down to make them, relax just a little bit on a national holiday. So I remember very, very well going to my cousin's house, and we would eat and play and run around, and then everyone would say, "Okay, okay, Wizard of Oz is coming on TV," and so we would all go into the living room. So, in short, watching The Wizard of Oz became an American family tradition starting in the 1950s. Okay, now let's look at the story and the characters. The story of The Wizard of Oz is based on a children's book that was published around 1900. So let's see, it became a film in 1939. That means it had been a book since 1900, almost 40 years the book had been around. So there were other movies made of The Wizard of Oz, but none of them were very long movies, and none of them were very big productions. They were black and white and silent and not so very interesting. So, anyway, the story of Dorothy and her fantasy travel was a familiar one to audiences by the time they went to movie theaters in 1939 to see the MGM version, the same movie that you saw. So, what were American people like? What was American life like in 1939 when MGM premiered this movie? Well, it really wasn't good. America had been in a big economic slump for nearly 10 years. And that's a period that we call today the Great Depression. People were out of work, and if they didn't have work, they weren't making much money. You know, thankfully, it only cost about, 15 cents, maybe 25 cents to go see a movie. The average person in America in 1939 made about $1,800 a year, or about $150 per month. So, like, ichiman gosen yen per month was the salary of the average American at that time. But even during the Great Depression, spending money to watch a movie was the number one pastime for Americans. They really went to the movie theaters. 85 million people a week. Remember, at this time, total US population was 130 million, and 85 million Americans went to the movies every week. Why? Movies are much more interesting than listening to the radio, and movies are less expensive than going to a Broadway show. And there's no television in 1939. Okay, American history now. The president of the US at the time was Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt was a rich, educated guy from an elite family, but he really had the common touch. People liked him. He was very warm and friendly. He was elected in 1932 to get rid of President Hoover. Hoover was president in 1929 when the US stock market crashed. So Americans blamed this economic depression on that other president. When Roosevelt, who we call FDR, when Roosevelt became president, he promised to get Americans working again. So he created jobs, building up America's infrastructure. FDR was a very popular president. He was elected president 4 times. The only person in US history elected 4 times. He was president of the US for 13 years, from 1933 to 1945. So, for almost all of the Great Depression and for World War II, FDR was president. Times were tough during the Great Depression, and Americans needed an escape. And so they found that escape in going to the movies. The Wizard of Oz tells us a very simple story of a preteen girl in Kansas living on a farm. And she's bored with her life there in the country. And she dreams of a better place in a faraway land. Why does this movie take place in Kansas? Well, okay, Kansas is boring. It's Inaka. It's not. It's like living in Gunma-ken. Okay, you don't want to. You know what I mean? It's Tsumanai City. So you do not want to live there. All right. So anyway. So Dorothy lives with her family on the farm in Kansas. Then suddenly she has that hit on the head, and the tornado brings her to the land of Oz, where she meets some really fantastic people. She meets the Munchkins, those little tiny short guys. She meets witches, and finally a wizard. From the very start of the movie, the audience of 1939 sees in black and white very, very familiar things. Typical farmhouse. Dorothy's aunt and uncle are a really good Christian couple, and they have taken in their niece. Note that Dorothy doesn't have parents, and we don't know what happened to them. So there's kind of a feeling of tragedy to Dorothy's situation, and that makes us sympathize with her. Dorothy is friendly with the guys who work on the farm, and they care about her too. Dorothy's best friend is her dog, Toto. And Dorothy's only enemy in the world is the mean lady down the road who hates Dorothy's dog. So what happens? Dorothy decides to run away from home, and on her way she meets this guy, a fortune teller, who's really kind of a, not really honest, not a bad guy, but not really a fortune teller. He's what we call a con man. So this con man, this professor, is kind enough to urge Dorothy to go back home so her aunt won't worry about her. So, in short, audiences of 1939 would have liked Dorothy and her family, and they would have been very familiar with the Kansas rural setting. Next, Dorothy returns home at the same time that the tornado picks up her house and drops it in the land of Oz. Now, at this point in the movie, audiences must have been really delighted with the transition scene. This beautiful, transition that goes from sepia tone into glorious Technicolor. And then we see the sets and the costumes and these exotic little people, the Munchkins of Munchkinland. So we're treated to several musical numbers and special effects, and the audience would have loved that. Dorothy is amazed by all this that she sees in this magical place, but she wants to go back home because she doesn't want her family to worry about her. She's a good girl, right? A good witch appears and gives Dorothy some magic shoes, and the magic shoes are referred to as the ruby slippers. Suddenly, the bad guy of the movie appears, the Wicked Witch of the West. She is really evil. Right? She shows up and she demands the slippers. And so that is setting up the story's character conflict. We've got good, pure little Dorothy, versus evil, the evil, wicked witch of the West. So in this scene, too, the movie's simple plot is revealed. She has to travel to the Emerald City to ask the great Wizard of Oz for help to get her back home. And to get there, she must follow the yellow brick road, follow the yellow brick road. Along the way, she makes friends. First of all, she meets the Scarecrow, who doesn't have any brains. And the Scarecrow has a really great line of dialogue that American audiences of 1939 would really love. He says, well, you know, there are a lot of people who do a lot of talking and they don't know anything, right? Every voter in America knows that politicians talk a lot, but they don't know anything, right? That was true 80 years ago, and it's true today. Another point you should notice is the reference to Abraham Lincoln. Remember, in the song, they're singing, with the thoughts you'd be thinking you could be another Lincoln if you only had a brain. So the reference to a Lincoln is really important. All American history books, from the 20th century, idolized Lincoln. Lincoln was like a god. He was the president of the United States during the terrible Civil War of the 1860s, 90, 70 years, earlier than this movie premiered. So the Civil War, was still fresh in the memories of Americans 70 years later. Okay, what do you think about Dorothy? You like her? Of course you do. She's cute. She dresses nice. She's polite to her elders, exactly like a young American girl should be. She offers to the Scarecrow to take him along to see the Wizard of Oz, because if the wizard can help Dorothy get back to Kansas, the wizard can surely help the Scarecrow get a brain. And so it goes. Dorothy is on her way to the Emerald City to meet the Wizard of Oz, and along the way she's collecting friends during her journey who need help. Now, audiences of 1939 would really understand this very well, because people were living in a depression. You know, these people need help. Not only this, but audiences wouldn't want to see a young female traveling alone. Every female needs male protection from all the bad things that might harm her. So notice that that's very different from Hollywood films today. I mean, in Hollywood today, you've got Hunger Games, you've got Katniss Everdeen, who can do everything herself. She doesn't need a man. In Star Wars, The Force Awakens, Star Wars 7, you've got Rey, a young girl who has the power of a Jedi Force. And she does not need a man to travel along with her and help her. But this is how American thinking was around the 1930s and 1940s. A girl who traveled alone was not a true lady. So this is kind of, a gender discrimination that was everywhere in American culture at that time. During their journey to the Emerald City, they're attacked by the Wicked Witch of the West a few times, directly and indirectly. An interesting scene is when Dorothy and her friends come to the end of the woods and they can see the beautiful Emerald City in the distance. They get really excited and they start running through a poppy field. And the Wicked Witch of the West is watching through her crystal ball, and she casts a spell over them. And then suddenly they become sleepy. They just want to lay down. And you and I watching that, we wonder, what's going on with that? When I was a kid, I didn't understand it either when I watched it. But all the adults who were watching the movie at that time would clearly understand that poppies have a drug effect. Poppies are the plants from which opium is made. Opium is an illegal drug today, but back in the days, in the 1920s and 1930s, opium was contained in many medicines that doctors prescribed. So the adults watching this film knew very well that opium or morphine would put people to sleep to help them to rest. Anyway, the good witch is watching over the field of poppies, and she cancels out the effect that the poppies have on Dorothy and her friends. So dun dun dun, dun they wake up suddenly, and they go to the gate of the Emerald City. Inside the Emerald City, there are all kinds of characters, including the doorman and the horse driver who pulls a coach pulled by a horse of different colors. Now, there's a phrase in the English language. When someone says, well, that's a horse of a different color, that means, oh, well, in that case, that's different. So, okay. So, this is a really marvelous special effect for the audience to see the same horse changing colors each time. And in fact, when they were producing the film, they had to paint the horse. Kawaiso! You have to put this special kind of paint on the horse. So, okay, so the horse brings them into the Emerald City to see the wizard. Inside the special room where the wizard sees visitors, the audience is just completely blown away by, this spectral image of the head of the Wizard of Oz. We don't even see a human, just this scary head, the spirit of the wizard. It's pretty remarkable special effects for 1939. And of course, Dorothy and her friends are scared to death of the wizard. Notice how Dorothy and the others are just absolutely shaking while they're talking to the wizard. And the wizard is not kind. He's not friendly at all. So the audience can see that Dorothy and her friends are dealing with someone who's a very powerful authority figure, like the boss of your company, or a banker giving you a loan to help you out with money, or God himself. The Wizard of Oz is not feeling very kind with Dorothy and her friends, and he says, "Oh, you've come a long way, and I don't really care. I want you to destroy the Wicked Witch of the West, and then I will give you what you want. In fact," he says, "I want you to bring me her broomstick as evidence that you've killed the Wicked Witch of the West." Now, for Dorothy and her friends, they really want the wizard to help. So they're going to do what the authority figure says has to be done. Okay, they're going to obey the wizard's demands and figure out some kind of plan to go and get the Wicked Witch of the West. The next few scenes are pretty spectacular too. We've got these flying monkeys, which, did you see those creepy flying monkeys? When I was a kid, I was scared to death by creepy flying monkeys. That was just the scariest scene on television. Even to this day, I sometimes have a nightmare about. Okay. Another great special effect is the Wicked Witch of the West flying on her broom, riding in the sky, in the clouds. She says, "Surrender, Dorothy." And of course, Dorothy is captured by the Wicked Witch of the West, and her friends have to rescue her because that's what friends do, right? So, we see the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow, and they're very actively involved with helping her out. And we notice that the Scarecrow doesn't need a brain after all. I mean, the Scarecrow is the one who figures out that if you cut this rope, then this big thing on the ceiling is going to fall down, and then they can run away. The Cowardly Lion shows that he's not a coward, that he can actually be brave. The Tin Man shows that he's got a heart and that he can feel emotion. So, despite the fact that the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion already have everything that they're going to ask the wizard to give them, they still believe that this authority figure has to give them what they need. Now, my favorite scene in the Wizard of Oz movie, Dorothy and her friends are standing in front of the Wizard of Oz holding the broomstick. Hey, look, we killed the Wicked Witch of the West, right? And the Wizard of Oz says, well, that's not good enough. I still have more things for you to do. And then finally, they say, hey, wait a minute, you're breaking your promise. I mean, here's our young Dorothy and her friends, and they are bravely standing up to authority in a way that adults in the audience would expect, but not children, okay? Audiences want to see authority figures held accountable for their promises. So if they lie, they have to be punished. So it's at that very moment that the little dog Toto goes right around the corner and peels back a curtain that reveals it's just a man who's pretending to be the Wizard of Oz. He's using this special machine to project his image and make his voice sound very big, when after all, he's just a regular guy behind the curtain. And that's my favorite quote of the movie. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I love that quote. Authority does not want you to know that they are just as human as you are. And so audiences of this time would really think that that was very amusing and very delightful. It's the authority figure is revealed as a fraud. So the powerful authority figures called out by Dorothy as a fraud. He's not really powerful. He's not really almighty. He's just a regular guy. And so at the end of the movie, we're left with the wizard bestowing upon each of Dorothy's friends some kind of honor or award. He gives the Scarecrow a diploma, the Doctor of Thinking or whatever. And he gives a heart to the Tin Man, and he awards courage to the Lion. But, the wizard never gave them these things. The wizard only confirms what they already had. It's kind of a, yoku dekimashita kind of thing. And that's what kids need. Young people need to know that they're good enough, that they're okay. So next, the wizard makes a rather elaborate plan to take Dorothy back with him to Kansas in a hot air balloon. And that was, but this is before airplanes, right? The story of The Wizard of Oz, the written story, was from about 1900. That's before we had airplanes. So the hot air balloon is kind of a fancy way for people to travel back in those days. But of course, something happens and Dorothy gets left behind. And she's like, don't show, oh my God, what am I going to do? And the good witch returns to tell Dorothy that, oh, you had the power to go home all along. All you have to do is click the heels of the ruby slippers and say, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place. And then she wakes up and all of her friends are around her. She's happy to be home and the music plays, Home Sweet Home, and then the end. So this is definitely a fairy tale for kids. The fairy tale cautions them to treasure home above other places. The fairy tale reminds them that friendship is important and that they should be polite and help other people. And kids should be obedient to authority, but they should be ready to fight against evil. These are all points that come up in traditional stories or fairy tales. But The Wizard of Oz adds at least two more points that Americans would especially love. Number one, some authority figures shouldn't be trusted or respected. They should be punished when they abuse their power, or they should be exposed if they are fake. The wizard is outed by Dorothy and is shamed by her and her friends, and ultimately the wizard has to leave town. This was a common way that good American citizens got rid of con men or frauds way back when. They were run out of town. Okay, second point is sometimes people must depend on help from others, and that's okay, especially in very difficult times. Generally speaking, American culture teaches young kids and everybody else that you have to be independent. Don't rely on other people. You have to rely on yourself. In the end, Dorothy solves her big problem herself. She, with the heels, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. The good witch tells her that she had the power all along. You can do it. Be a big girl. Solve your own problems. Oz couldn't do it. The good witch didn't use her magic, but Dorothy finds the power that she always had. Okay, let's recap. Several messages of the movie The Wizard of Oz. Number 1, home is the best place. Number 2, friends are important and they're going to help you out. Number 3, you have to fight back against your enemies. Number 4, you gotta be polite to people, but don't be afraid to stand up to authority figures, because authority figures don't know everything. They're just human. And number 5, depend on yourself. Be self-reliant. Now, why are we watching The Wizard of Oz first in this class? Well, The Wizard of Oz, as I said, is one of the most famous movies in American film history. The Library of Congress called it the most viewed film in television history. Over the Rainbow, which Dorothy sings back when she's back in Kansas, was ranked number 1 on the Songs of the Century list. In March 2017, Over the Rainbow, sung by Judy Garland, was entered into the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress. The word munchkin, created by the Wizard of Oz story, is sometimes used as slang by adults to refer to kids. Like you say to a girl, "Hey, I like you. Your munchkins are cute too," meaning your kids are cute. Right? 3 quotes from The Wizard of Oz are in the top 100 of the AFI movie quotes. Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. That's number 4 of all the top 100 quotes. What does that mean? Today, we use that. Native speakers widely use that, meaning, hey, this is a strange place. It's a new place. I've never been here before. Number 23 on the list is There's No Place Like Home. There's no place like home. And number 99 on the list is the evil Wicked Witch of the West's quote, "I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too." I do a pretty good imitation of this, so hang on. Ready? Ready? "I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too." Thank you. I love doing that. So, what about Dorothy's slippers? They're magical, right? Did you know that Dorothy's original ruby slippers are on display at the Smithsonian Museum? Did you know that The Wizard of Oz was among the first 25 movies ever inducted into America's National Film Registry? And did you know that Judy Garland's adorable outfit, the blue and white dress and all that stuff, that outfit has been embraced by the LGBT community for years. And the phrase, "friend of Dorothy," was code for being gay. So, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, "Oh, I didn't know you were a friend of Dorothy," means I didn't know that you were gay. That's a phrase that, LGBT people used together. Take a look at these memes here. Uh, I, I love this. I love this one. Uh, the Wizard of Oz is the ultimate chick flick. Chick flick means girls' movie. The ultimate chick flick. Two women trying to kill each other over shoes. Alice meets Dorothy. Wherever did you get those neat shoes? Oh, it's a long story. Um, Here's the Good Witch, Glenda the Good Witch of the North, saying, "Don't make me drop a house on you." Surrender Dorothy, right? This is when Donald Trump was president. People wrote, "Surrender Donald." So these are memes, and memes are an important thing these days, shared on social media. And there are so many Wizard of Oz memes, um, and so many quotes, and so many famous songs, and the names of the characters, and the whole story of the Wizard of Oz. All of this is very deeply embedded in American consciousness. So, okay, a final note. The Wizard of Oz was a hit movie. It was re-released in theaters and then on TV and then on VHS and then DVD, and now it's on Netflix and probably Amazon Prime. It has remained one of the most popular movies in American film history. It's so important. The character names, the songs, the quotes of dialogue, they are all deeply embedded in American culture. If you're American, you know these bits of cultural information. And that shared knowledge with other Americans is one of the points that makes The Wizard of Oz important enough for us to watch and study. Students, thanks for watching this. Do the activity now, and I'll see you for next week's talk. Bye.